blog, thedewellhomestead.com, where I like to share farm-to-table recipes and homemade natural living from our homestead here in Duval. And today I have a really great recipe. It is our cheesy sourdough biscuits. Started making this recipe not too long ago and I was totally hooked on it. This is basically a little, almost like a bread roll, like a biscuit, but it's made with sourdough and cheese. So it's a really great appetizer or side dish on your, dinner. So we'll have this with like a side of steak or in a salad. So if you're tired of eating just plain bread, or maybe you're having a dinner party and you want to have a really fun appetizer, this is perfect for that. They're also quite addicting, so once you start making them, you're probably going to be making them every week and just munching on them throughout the day. And so you will need sourdough starter for this recipe. If you don't know what that is basically a cultured fermented grain that is made from flour and water, and that's it. So if you're new to sourdough and you want to learn more about that and why it's healthier and easier to digest fermented grain, essentially because the fermentation process helps strip some of the components of the grain away that are difficult to digest when you're eating processed grain. So it's a very old, traditional way of creating bread, hence the sourdough bread. So I have a recipe on my blog for how to make sourdough starter. I will link it below, as well as in the cards of this video, and how to make sourdough bread. So if you want to start making your own bread, it is really quite easy, but the starter takes about a week to make. Once you have the starter made, then you can use it almost instantly. So when you're using sourdough starter in a recipe, the idea of a starter is that it's going to allow your bread to rise. So instead of buying a yeast packet for bread, you don't need yeast because you have sourdough starter. So when you're making a recipe that needs a rise, then it's important that your starter is fed and active and bubbly and ready to go. This recipe, I wouldn't say that that's as important. So you can use discard sourdough starter for this recipe. We are also going to let this recipe ferment overnight. Now that is also not totally necessary. So if you want to make this recipe in a pinch, you can throw it together now. It just won't have that long fermented benefit of the grains being more easily digestible, which is fine if you're not someone who has a hard time tolerating grains, and doesn't matter anyway. Okay, so that's my spiel on sourdough starter. I just don't want you to feel discouraged from making this recipe if you don't have your starter ready or something like that. So in a bowl, you're going to combine half a cup of fed active sourdough starter. Again, this is only if you want to let this ferment. 1 egg, 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of salt. We like to use pink Himalayan salt. 1/3 of a cup of milk. And 1 cup of grated cheese. I'm going to use Parmesan today because that's what I have, but you could also use cheddar or a combination of both. About 1 cup of grated cheese. Then you're going to add 1/3 of a cup of melted coconut oil. Make sure you do this last because if the coconut oil gets cold, it will start to harden. But right now it is so hot in our house that I don't need to worry about that. So then you're going to mix everything together with your hands, making sure to really get in the egg and the milk. You could also use a spoon for this, but every time I make a dough product, I find myself just using my hands because I can really, I don't know, I just feel like I can stir it better. And I can also tell like the consistency. I'm almost done. So you're gonna have kind of a doughy, slimy ball that forms. Then I'm just gonna cover the bowl with plastic wrap and set it in the fridge and let it ferment overnight, and I will cook these tomorrow. You can also let them sit in the fridge for a day or two and it'll be still fine. I like to cook these in a cupcake tin, so you just line it with little parchment paper baking cups, pull your dough out of the fridge, and bake at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. Thank you so much for cooking with me today and making cheesy sourdough biscuits. I hope you love them. If you are new to my page, make sure you subscribe on YouTube and like on Facebook. Every week I post new farm-to-table recipes, homesteading, and homemade natural living from our homestead here in Duval. The full recipe with a printable recipe card that you can just print off and store will be on the blog at theduvalhomestead.com, and some more details about this recipe, some tips, etc. Also, make sure you check out my other sourdough recipes. I have sourdough bread, sourdough pancakes, sourdough pizzelles. Thank you so much for stopping by at the Duval Homestead.